All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Elaine Christian with the City of West Palm Beach Office of Sustainability, and we are so excited to be partnering with NCAT and Bedner's Farm Fresh Market today for a special live Q&A. We have NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist Nina Prater with us today, and also Marie Bedner, who is the co-owner, operations manager, and CFO for the Bedner family of companies. And I can't wait just to discuss the importance of soil health and learn all about sustainable agriculture practices. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please drop them in the chat box and we are going to have Q&A at the end. This program is being recorded and will be posted to our Facebook page at WPB Green. It probably won't be up until Monday, but be on the lookout. And now I want to transition to Nina to learn all about soil health.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys about soil health. I'm assuming that you learned a whole lot about it while watching the movie Kiss the Ground, but I'd love to just go back over it a little, give a little review, and hopefully that'll spur some questions for the Q&A afterwards. So I work for the National Center for Appropriate Technology, and trying to get through my next slide. There we go. I'm an outreach coordinator for our Gulf States office. We have 6 offices around the US, and one is in Jackson, Mississippi. That's our Gulf States office, which covers the Florida region. But I'm based out of our Fayetteville, Arkansas office. That's where I am now. I just had to put a goat selfie up there because, you know, you can't go wrong with a goat selfie. I'm also a soil specialist for our program. For our ATTRA program, it's a Sustainable Agriculture Information Service. And my husband and I own and operate, along with his family, a sustainable livestock farm in Northwest Arkansas called, we have Cedar Creek Farm, where we have grass-fed beef and meat goats and a few pigs and things like that. And I'm available for questions anytime about soils or soil-related concerns at ninap@ncat.org. So NCAT and ATTRA, it's a lot of acronyms. So just to go over those real quick, NCAT stands for the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And we do sustainable agriculture information as well as sustainable energy projects out of our Butte, Montana office. And our goal is to help farmers, beginning farmers, experienced farmers, anywhere along the spectrum from organic to conventional. We help any kind of farmer with any kind of technical assistance. And there's a number of ways you can get a hold of us. We have specialists all across the country. There's a ton of information on our website to start with. So that's attra.ncat.org. And then we have a call line Monday through Friday where you can talk to a real person. I know that's rare these days. And then you can always email us at askanag@ncat.org and we'll get your question to the right specialist. So let's get right into healthy soils. Kiss the Ground really did a great job of talking about soils as a living ecosystem. And I think this is so new for people because they're used to thinking of soil as just like the mineral, ground up rock, like really tiny bits of mineral all smushed together. But it's really, that's just a part of this broader ecosystem of living things that live within that mineral component. And since it's below ground and so much of it is microscopic, I know if your brain works like mine, I like to be able to visualize things. So I always like to make the analogy that the ecosystem below ground is just like any ecosystem that we're more familiar with from the Nature Channel or whatever above ground, with predators and prey and plants that the herbivores feed on and everything interacting and a lot of diversity and a lot of activity. And through that, nutrients are constantly cycling. And so the soil is just the same way. The plants create this organic matter, which is the base for all of these other living things, for fungi and bacteria, and then larger insects and worms and things like that, ants and spiders and all that kind of stuff. And every time something eats something else, nutrients are released into the soil ecosystem, and that's how plants are fed. And so that's why farmers should really promote a healthy soil, because that's how their plants will access nutrients that they need to grow. So what does it look like when if say you dig up some of your garden soil? What should this look like? You know, we don't have a good, you know, we're not built with this information right off the bat. So you can see those two hands are holding two different soils from the same area, but under different management. And what you really want to see is the one with all the loose crumbs, and you can see root hairs and stuff. That is a good, healthy soil ecosystem with room for air and water movement and for these creatures to move around and do their thing. The other one is a really compacted soil, and there's not a lot of life happening in there. And these two soils were created in the same environment, but because of management, they ended up in these two different states. So it's how we manage our soil has a really big impact on its health in the long term. And I just wanted to go over this process again, because you know, it's been a long time since I was in 10th grade biology class. So, and I just think it's so amazing to understand the power of plants and what they do to build healthy soil. So the sun shines down, and the plants, the solar panels on the plants, all the leaves capture that energy. And then they take carbon dioxide from the air, and they take water from the soil, and they do their magic photosynthesis, and it creates carbohydrates, C6H12O6. And then it uses those to build all the plant parts, and it gives off oxygen that we need to breathe. So it's a really amazing process. And then a key part of this that I don't think we understood until recently is that not all of those carbohydrates are used to build the plant. The plants release a lot of those, like up to 40% of those carbohydrates. They leach them out into the soil to feed the soil microbiome, because those microorganisms, they have a symbiotic relationship with those microorganisms, and those bring nutrients to the plants. So there's this give and take between the plants and the soil. And all of those carbohydrates that are released into the soil, they can be sequestered in the soil. So removed from the atmosphere and pumped into the soil, and they can be sequestered there if we manage our soils well. And that has huge potential for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So I think that I wanted to spend a little time with that process to make sure that you understood the power of that process. Some people call it the liquid carbon pathway, because these carbons are exuded out through the plant roots into the soil. And so it's a really powerful tool that farmers can use to build their soil's health, and also to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. And the thing to understand about our soils is they were built under natural ecosystems over hundreds of thousands of years. And I think it's really good to use nature as a model for understanding how soils are built, in order to understand how we can maintain those soils and even regenerate depleted soils. So some lessons that we can learn from nature of how soils are built are: in stable natural ecosystems, soils are covered by plants all the time. You don't see bare soils in natural ecosystems, either plants or plant litter, like leaves falling from trees. And then they're never turned on a field scale. Tillage is not a thing really in natural ecosystems. So it's good to understand that that part of soil building. And then in natural ecosystems, there's huge biodiversity among plants, animals that rely on those plants, that you don't see monocultures in nature. And then animals and plants interact in natural ecosystems. You don't have a piece of land that has just animals and then a piece of land that has just plants. It's integrated. And then the water cycle in natural ecosystems is intact, except for, catastrophic events. The water that's rains down is absorbed by those natural soils, and then the plants can access it during dry periods. And then when we consider nutrients in the natural ecosystems, they cycle within the system. There's not like a fertilizer truck driving through and dumping a whole bunch of fertilizer. And then that means that very little leaches out of the system nutrients entering natural water bodies can cause eutrophication and all kinds of environmental problems. So nutrients are a really important thing to consider. And then the nutrients that do enter the system are biological in origin. So legumes fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and introduce those into the soil ecosystem. So those are just some things to keep in mind for how soils are built naturally. And people have looked at those principles and come up with 5 principles of soil health. NRCS says there's 4, so there's some wiggle room here, but these principles are broad principles, and there's not one way to put them to use on your farm or in your garden, but it's good to understand these overarching principles so that you can figure out which practices work for you, because no 2 farms are alike, and so you just have to be your own scientist and figure out what's going to work for you. But one of these principles is minimizing disturbance. A lot of farms have found ways to minimize tillage, even if they can't eliminate it completely. So that's a good way to help build your soil's health. And then another form of disturbance is chemical disturbance, and that's introducing large amounts of chemical fertilizers or large amounts of pesticides that disrupt that soil ecosystem. So minimizing that and being very conscientious anytime you have to add disturbance to the system is important for soil health. And then maximizing biodiversity is another soil principle, because these soils were built in natural ecosystems where there's a ton of biodiversity. That's key. Diversity equals resilience in soil. If you have diverse plants, you're going to be supporting diverse microbial populations underground. So that's really important. And that can be achieved in all different kinds of ways on different farms or gardens. And then keeping the soil covered as much of the year as possible. So using mulch if you have to, or having a good stand of cover crop or things like that to protect the soil from erosion, from wind or water erosion, and also from temperature extremes. The soil can get very hot if it's left bare. So keeping it covered keeps that soil ecosystem in a nice temperature zone. And soil microbes are just like us. If we get too hot, we shut down. And so they do too. And we want those microbes active so that they can cycle nutrients for the plants. And then living roots to really capture as much of that solar energy as possible and turn it into those sugars in the soil, those carbohydrates. Keeping living roots in the ground as much of the year as possible is a really powerful tool to build soil health. And then including animals, that one's a little controversial and it can be pretty complicated. But I like to include it because animals can be a really powerful soil building mechanism. I don't like to call animals mechanisms, but tool, I guess. Through grazing can stimulate grass growth and can cycle nutrients faster through the animal. But animals are, as a livestock farmer, I can readily say animals can be a pain to take care of if they are constantly testing your electric fence or whatever. And so not everyone, and for food safety reasons, some produce farms can't have animals around their vegetables. So it's not always possible, but using composted manure is a good way to get them worked into the system also. But I always like to plug the use of animals, as long as you're not overgrazing. That's another danger zone. So those are the 5 soil health principles, and people all over the country are researching ways to best utilize these principles. This is still a relatively new area of study. And so NCAT and ATTRA are putting on a soil health conference in March, a virtual conference. And it's going to be 2 days that's going to have tons of really interesting speakers, farmers, researchers, all kinds of presenters talking about new innovative ways to achieve soil health on the farm, and from all over the country. And so I think this is going to be a really exciting event. And I just had to put a plug in for that because I've been working on this. We were scheduled to do it this March, but then of course the pandemic made that impossible. So it's been delayed a year. And so now I'm like doubly excited for this event. I think it's going to be a really great way to learn from the people who are really pushing the boundaries on how to implement soil health in our country. It's so important for the resilience of our farms and the profitability of our farms and for the climate. So I'm excited about this, and you don't have to be a farmer to attend. I think it should be interesting for anybody. Is that my last slide? Oh, no, this is my last slide. Okay, so I just think it's really important to aim high on this subject. I think we can't have our bar too low, because I just love this quote from Wes Jackson at the Land Institute in Kansas. If your life's work can be accomplished in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. I think we need to think multiple generations ahead, especially with farming. It's amazing how fast farmland can be degraded, but we're learning that farmland can be regenerated, within 5 years, depending on the situation. But we can keep building and building and building that soil health so it gets better and better and better for future generations. I have 2 kids, and we want to leave our farm in even better shape than it is now, so that when they inherit it, they can keep building that soil health, keep building on it, so that their grandchildren have a healthy farm to inherit. And I think it's important to think that big when we're talking about this topic, especially in relation to climate change. So yeah, that's what I would like to leave with you with is aim high and think big.
Thank you so much, Nina. And again, just want to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat box. I do want to ask really quickly before we move on, though, is there any sort of charge for the Soil Innovations Conference?
Yes, I believe for farmers, it's $50 for the 2 days, and for others, it's $75 for the 2 days. But we are offering scholarships for limited resource farmers. We really want anybody who wants to attend to be able to. So you're welcome to reach out to me if you have more questions about the conference, or always reach out on our website. We really want it to be accessible to everybody.
Well, thank you. Okay, so now I want to transition to Marie Bedner with Bedner's Farm.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and thank you for inviting us. A little brief history on Bedner's and myself. I'm native of Fort Lauderdale and a farmer's daughter, farmer's wife. My father-in-law, Art Bedner, when he married Henrietta, they were from Pennsylvania. He was a third generation farmer in Pennsylvania. And when they got married, they saw an opportunity in South Florida. That was 1950. So they moved with just what they had and started farming in Broward County. And as development came along, they got pushed up into Palm Beach County, which is where our home farm is still now in Delray. And as he had 3 sons, which my husband Steve, so he's 4th generation farmer. And currently we are the largest bell pepper grower in the Southeast. And about 30 years ago, my father-in-law saw technology changing, everything changing. So he turned the farm over to his 3 sons and the bookkeeping to me. He was still doing everything by hand. So we brought it up to speed. And I used to get a lot of calls from teachers and other groups that wanted to come out for field trips. And we weren't set up for that on the farm side. So 12 years ago, we diversified and opened up the first Bedner's Farm Fresh Market in Boynton Beach on 80 acres. And what is so unique and special about that farm is we're right next to the wildlife refuge. So we coexist with that and are a good neighbor and have partnered with them in educating people. So we do educational tours. We have an educator. He's retired USDA. So he really is able to communicate to all groups from kindergartens to senior groups on what we do. And it's really becoming precision agriculture over time. So when we begin our season, we have soil samples done. So we know what nutrients need to be put back into the soil. So we're not overdoing any one thing. And as you can see in the picture, we do the beds. It's totally different from what you saw in Kiss the Ground, our type of agriculture here. It is much more sustainable and healthier. So you see we make the recyclable mulch that we grow on. So that makes the bed and helps with erosion. And then also in the picture, you'll see the sugar cane. That's our wind block. So that really helps eliminate the wind from just whipping through the field. And that's our U-pick strawberry field that you see there. So on the 80-acre farm in Boynton, where we do the tours, we also have tram rides. And we didn't have audio on it. In the first couple of years, we received a lot of questions. So we took those top 10 questions and put audio. So it answers people's question on why do you do that? Of course, with the pandemic now, we're not doing the tours. We look forward to getting back to that, but they typically do run during our growing season, which for us, it is November to May. And then in the off season, it's just too hot, too wet in Florida. So we do plant a cover crop, which is sorghum. And we also do flood our fields. We let it naturally flood. That really helps with the nematodes and any different bacterias in the soil. And so we plow in the sorghum. So that's a natural nutrient to go back into the soil. And then we begin our process all over again. On the 80-acre farm here, we grow about 60 different varieties of vegetables that we pick daily, and they're brought into the Boynton market. 4 years ago, we opened a market in Delray, and just this past December, we opened up the 3rd market in West Palm, which we're really excited about. That's just a big step for us with the addition of meats and seafoods. We try to source locally as much as we can, different products, whether it's chips or just whatever we have available for us that we do source. So it really has been a wonderful experience to be able to educate the consumer. And I think they really understand now. And get the difference from something that's picked and put right on the shelf. It doesn't sit in the cooler for any length of time. So I think they understand, and also being able to come out and see where, you know, their produce is grown, how it's grown. So it's been a very wonderful thing and positive thing for us. So I think overall, people are more in tune with what we do. You know, Nina and I were talking earlier, and Florida's known for beaches and Disney World. I don't think it was realized, you know, how big the agriculture is and how diverse within the state, how many different commodities are grown. Our farms are spread out into 80 acres, 200 acres. We're in Palm Beach, Martin, and St. Lucie counties now. So, you know, it's a lot of wearing a lot of different hats within the business, and everyone has their job. We do have the 5th generation. My nephew Jesse has been on the farm for quite some time now, and now he has 3 sons. Oldest one being 6. So we'll see. Hopefully, you know, they'll be able to step into this if they so choose, that they want to do this. And, you know, at the end of the day, look, the soil makes our livelihood. So we have to be good stewards of the land and make sure we're doing everything we can in our power to preserve it. And so really that's what I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much. All right, so now let's get into the good part, or the good stuff, the exciting part, right? Not that everything else wasn't good. I shouldn't say that, but I guess the moment we've all been waiting for, the Q&A. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you do want to raise your hand, we can have, you know, unmute you, and or you can unmute yourself, I guess, and, you know, ask your question instead of typing it. So again, you can use the raise the hand function or type it in the chat, either way. And so I have just a few here just to kick us off. So when discussing climate chaos, why is it crucially important to address carbon drawdown, land generation, and ecosystem function?
Well, I'm happy to jump in here. Climate chaos is going to be a real challenge for farmers. We've adapted our systems to certain climatic parameters, and to eliminate the worst of what scientists have predicted could happen if we don't change anything to the way we operate right now. I mean, as a society, you know, removing carbon from the atmosphere is going to be critical, and plants do that just naturally. So being able to harness the power of plants to stop the runaway train of climate chaos is incredibly powerful. And in doing so, farmers become more resilient to those climatic changes by increasing soil organic matter and increasing their soil structure and all of those good things. Farms are more resilient. Their soil can withstand heavy rains, you know, droughts, things like that. So it really, you can't go wrong, really. And I should say that drawing down carbon from the atmosphere into soils or into forests, or however we do it, is one part of the solution. But reducing fossil fuel use is, you know, it can't, you know, do it on its own. We have to reduce our fossil fuel use as well. Did I answer all the parts of that question? I feel like there was another part.
You know, I feel like this could be like a super long discussion here in and of itself, especially of talking about reducing fossil fuels and carbon emissions and everything like that. But the soil is just so important as a carbon sink. So that's just something that we really want to highlight and raise more awareness of. And Marie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that one.
Well, as farmers, we're doing our part to, you know, ensure climate smart processes within our practice as far as efficient irrigation, soil restoration, and other types of things like that. That, again, I said, you know, the soil makes our livelihood, so we certainly have to take care of it.
And let's see. So what are some challenges to sourcing more regenerative food? What are some of the issues we should be aware of before going to the grocery store or restaurant?
Well, I think really buy local. That's the big key thing um, to anyone shopping. And if you can't buy local, certainly buy U.S. Produced products. We used to have the label of origin where you knew where your product was coming from, and that's something that everyone can do. That's their part, is to know where their produce is coming from.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that when you do shop local, you have the ability to talk to the farmers and say, hey, what kind of soil management, if you want to get into it, hey, what kind of sustainable practices are you using? That's really important to me. And communicating, that with your farmer will let them know that that's important to their customers. And supporting that work that they're doing is really important. Farmers can't survive without customers, so we have to support the ones that are doing a good job with their soils. But not everyone can find fresh produce at a farmer's market year round. So going into a grocery store, when you're faced with sort of anonymous products that you don't know where they came from, I think we have to, as consumers, we have to do the best that we can with the information we're given. So whatever your values are, try and find products that match those. For me, I when I'm just at Walmart buying groceries, I do look for organic. But if I'm at the farmer's market, I don't worry about that so much because I know these folks are local, and so it's not easy. My big hope for our food system is that all different kinds of farmers all over the country are supported policy-wise, or in whatever way we can figure out to do, so that most of the food in the grocery store is from a regenerative farm. That's my dream, because then you don't have to worry about, oh, can I afford this brand over this brand? It's not the consumer's responsibility. It's our society as a whole, and it's accessible to everybody. There's so much confusion around labels, and is it natural? Is it, whatever. There's the labeling system we have is, I think, inadequate. And so I just feel like we have to get all the foods there to be regenerative, for the system to really change. So that's my think big thing.
Well, we have some good questions coming in. Someone asked how to change sand. So we have very sandy soil here. How to change sand into healthy soil?
Yeah, I will let Marie chime in too, but one thing that I know is very hard for sandy soils is to build organic matter. It's just, there's not as much surface area in sandy soils as in, say, a loam or more clay soil. So building organic matter is a huge challenge. And also in Florida, where it's warm year round, those microorganisms are constantly consuming that organic matter. So you're gonna have to constantly be replenishing it.
If you're gonna stand there.
But Marie, you might have some more.
Yep, I had to unmute.
You might have some more hands-on advice since you farm there.
Well, the soil where we are out west on the west side of 441, I mean, it's very good soil. That's why once we lose a farm to development, you're never going to get it back in South Florida. And like I said, our soil is tested, so we know what we need to put back in the nutrients. I know a lot of people ask us about gardens in this area, and it's really hard to have a backyard garden here, not just because of the soil, but the bugs and the pests that we're a tropical climate. So we we tend to get, you know, a lot more disease and bacteria. And when it rains, that brings in more problems. So the soil is something that we do maintain. And like I said, with us doing the raised bed, we're able to control the erosion and keep it healthy, keep the soil healthy.
And we're getting some questions in about the microbiome. Can either of you speak to the importance of microbiomes?
Yeah, I was just trying to see what the exact question was. Let's see. We are now looking at what more we can do, including understanding more about the microbiome and how to ensure we have the right microbes to contribute to a healthy soil. That's a great question. You know, I think it's like the new frontier is the soil microbiome. And so understanding the balance of microbes in the soil is really important. I would recommend, what's the name of that book? Teaming with Microbes is a really great book. I forget the author, but Google Teaming with Microbes, and that's a great book on what the different microorganisms in your soil do. But I think it's a kind of a situation of if you build it, they will come. So if you give them, you know, organic matter to consume, they will come. And if you constantly are feeding them, they will stay. So, you know, giving them mulch or, you know, cover crops to really support that habitat, I think that's the best approach to getting the right microbes in your soil. There's not like a spray you can add, really. I mean, some people do compost teas and you can get really complex about it, or worm castings and things like that. And all of those are good, but I think in general, just giving them a habitat and food in the form of organic matter is a really good place to start.
And also, we have a question about, can we have more specifics how we can individually and collectively make a positive impact? So, you know, probably a lot of our viewers today, you know, just have, you know, like we mentioned, like the small backyard space. So really whether it's maybe having a vegetable garden of their own or just individual actions that people can take day to day, what would you suggest?
Buy Marie's vegetables. And also, if you just have a yard and a garden, do things like, instead of removing the grass that you mow, you know, mow it and leave it in place. That feeds the soil. I never understood why people always remove the grass. That's just, you're just mining nutrients from your soil. Or, you know, you can spread compost, a thin layer of compost on your soil every so often, and that adds organic matter to your soil. There's a really great book called The Hidden Half of Nature by David Montgomery and Ann Bilke, I think is how you say her last name. And they're a husband and wife who live in Seattle, I think it's Seattle, somewhere in the Northwest. And they wanted to have a garden to grow their own vegetables in their backyard, but it was just clay. And so they just started importing all kinds of compost. They'd get coffee grounds from the local coffee shop, and they had all these compost piles going. And they changed their soil from just a hard clay to a beautiful garden soil. So, you know, I think that's a great book for inspiration on how you can do it yourself on a small piece of land, because they're sequestering carbon on their land. And I think that's really powerful. You can do it on a small scale, but I also think encouraging your representatives in the government to support policies that that encourage soil health and that enable farmers to do that is a really good, good way we as individuals can use our voices, not just through gardening or, you know, riding our bikes or whatever, but using our voices too. Okay,
Definitely. It
I
makes
see someone's wanting the names of the books. All
It
right,
makes a huge, you know, contacting your local and state representatives really does make a huge impact. And I know sometimes like picking up the phone and calling them may seem kind of weird. It may seem, you know, uncomfortable at first, but I promise it goes so far. And even if you don't feel comfortable making a phone call, writing an email, sending a letter even. So there are a lot of ways that you can make your voice heard, and always vote as well. Voting is very important. Marie, I don't know, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, there's a wealth of information out there for the public through Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services. You know, the average person can get information on starting their own garden. We also have locally master gardeners that are able to reach out and get information for further information for them.
And Abigail, I see your question. Are there any yard consultants we can contact to give information, ideas, and design to improve backyard habitat? Definitely, yes.
That would be the master gardeners that I just referred to. That through Mount's Botanical Garden, you can find some different information, and people more than willing to help with that. You know, say for example, what attracts butterflies, that type of thing. So yeah, definitely reach out to them for that information.
Yes, and also if you want to chat more about that, Abigail, you can always email sustainability@wpb.org. We'd be happy to share more resources with you.
Thank you.
Well, definitely the master gardeners for sure. Yeah. And you're welcome. And also, you know, sometimes it can be, I think sometimes people think that local food or vegan food can sometimes be more expensive, or maybe you're leaving out culturally appropriate foods, you know, things like that. How can we make the regenerative diet more inclusive? And I know sometimes I think this thought process is skewed in a way, because I go to Bedner's and the prices are so much lower than if I were to go to, you know, another big box store. So I don't know, can either of you speak to that a little bit?
Well, with us picking our own produce and putting it on our own shelves, we're cutting out so many middle people that the pricing is better. I mean, it's definitely, you can definitely see that. And we hear that all the time with what we grow, and we're able to, and it's not, and we grow a wide variety. And if we don't, we get it from our local farmer. Like we do have Chinese vegetables from Yi Farm down the street. So we do have a wide variety that can fit different cultural needs. So definitely, you know, local is the way to go to keeping the pricing down.
Yeah, I think there's a really big debate right now in terms of what kind of diet is most climate friendly or most sustainable. And I don't think there's one right answer. I mean, I personally raise livestock. And I used to be a vegetarian before I met my husband. So I've done a little bit of everything in terms of what my diet is. So I really understand, you know, why people choose not to eat meat. But I see meat produced in a very environmentally unfriendly way in certain areas, like cutting down the Amazon to raise beef is just horrendous. So I think that each kind of food can be sustainable or unsustainable. It can be, so you can't say all meat is unsustainable and all vegetables are sustainable. You can't draw lines like that. It's much, much more complicated. Same with seafood, you know, some seafood is, you know, being depleted, but some is helping the ocean. So it's an incredibly complex issue. And in terms of food accessibility, I think it's a very real issue, you know, in parts of the country where there's, some people call it food deserts, where there's not any fresh produce at all available, or I know some people are calling it food apartheid because it's a human created condition rather than an environmentally created condition. Going back to the history of how our cities were laid out and redlining and all of that history where people of color were, shut out of certain neighborhoods. So we have situations around the country where fresh food at all isn't accessible. And those kinds of situations really need to be addressed for everybody's health. And like I said before, when I was going on my rant about grocery stores, all the food in there needs to be healthy for people. Like it needs to be accessible to everyone. This can't be an elitist thing. I just think that it's a human right to be able to have healthy food, and not everyone has the ability to get to a farmer's market. So we have to make it accessible for everybody. I think that's a major piece of work that we have to do as a society, is figure out how to make it available.
And speaking to food deserts too, we, with the city of West Palm Beach, we have looked at, where our food deserts are in the city. And so we've tried to make some improvements there. We recently, I want to say it was a year ago, but the past year seems to have flown by so quickly. So it may have been 2 years now. But we did plant a food forest next to the Henrietta Bridge Farm, very close to downtown. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with that area, but we do have a food forest there. So that's one, big step that we took, and we're really trying to make food available for people. And healthy food, like you said, it's very important.
And it seems like the different cities are trying to do gardens, because we've been contacted quite a bit to help assist with trying to put a garden in, which is interesting. And then of course the neighborhood that just opened up out off Southern, where the ATTRA hood. So that's a whole new concept where the people that live there have a piece of the acreage that they have and are able to get the fresh fruits and vegetables. So that's a new concept, and I think that ATTRA-hood, may take off throughout the country, which would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Certainly hope so. I do want to leave with one question here we had, and Marie, this may be more focus for you here. But what is being done on the local level to eliminate the spraying on agro, or maybe that was supposed to be of agrochemicals, since those are such a large threat to our air, water, soil, and supply, the greatest threat to microbes? I think that was a little choppy there, but do you know if there's anything being done, or if there's any, or Nina, you may know. I'm certainly not an expert there, so handing it off to you guys.
Well, I mean, the synthetic chemicals and pesticides and things are a past. We have, they've been banned in the US for quite some time, and we, haven't used them in quite a while. There are more disease resistant plants being available, which are not GMO. That's a huge buzzword right now. I hear it used to be organics, now it's GMO. So it's something that we monitor. We adhere to very strict food safety guidelines. We're audited every year. They come and on the farm, spend 2 days on the farm and looking at all of our protocols that we have in place. So I'm very comfortable with what we do, that we're doing our best to help protect the environment.
Yeah, I'm not sure in terms of locally what's going on in Florida, but I know that there's all kinds of work being done to promote integrated pest management, where you can sort of create habitat for beneficial insects and things like that, to help control insect pests, and then using careful crop rotation can help prevent pests build up in the soil. So there's all these things that farmers and gardeners can do to eliminate the need for them, you know, outright. So I know though, as a gardener in Arkansas that fails every year to grow things, because I just have a small garden on my, at my house, that I don't sell anything from. We just sell livestock. And the bugs, oh my gosh, my garden gets eaten every year. And so, there's a lot of pest and disease pressure in the Southeast. And so, it's not easy to grow things without spraying at all. And I know people do it, but there's a reason that organic costs more is because it's hard to produce as much when you're under that much pest pressure. So yeah, I don't, I know farmers don't want to spray very much though, because it costs money. You have to buy those things, and that's an input cost. So the less, farmers are motivated to spray as little as possible and to find ways to create a farm where they don't have to. But anyway, it's a tough one to do, but I think it is important for, there's a lot of information out there about the insect apocalypse that's happening, of insect numbers in natural and agricultural environments declining at huge rates. And that's a really bad situation in terms of not just pollinators for our food crops, but insects for our bird populations to eat and things like that. So finding ways to coexist with insects, I think, is important. But yeah, farmers have to make a living, so it's not easy.
All right, before we wrap up, we did have one more question come in that I want to address. What are ways to test the soil to determine what nutrients are missing, and how would you add the missing nutrients back in the soil? So I guess if we're thinking on like an individual kind of probably smaller scale, what would you guys suggest?
I don't know, in Florida, I'm sure you have soil testing through your extension service. Is that right?
Yes, that's where it would go through, is the county extension office. And again, you can get that from the FDAC's information locally, where it could be sent off. We have someone specifically at Crop Scout that does that for us and sends off to, I'm not sure where that goes, what lab, where the lab is located, but that's how we do it. But for the backyard gardener, yes, you could get that information off FDACs.
And then it will tell you what nutrient levels are in your soil. And then usually they give recommendations in terms of how many pounds per acre, or, whatever your scale is per square foot, to add to your soil. How do you know where to get which nutrients for what? It's complicated. I always advocate for the home grower to find a really good quality compost to add nutrients back, because it has the carbon in it too, and the micronutrients and things like that. But if there's a really stark nutrient deficiency that your soil test turns up, I would just get on a gardening website and search around for the right nutrient to fill that hole. But I think getting nutrients from compost or other natural, there's things like fish emulsions and other kinds of fertilizers like that. But getting the right source is good. It's the problem with adding a lot of nitrogen to the soil, just straight chemical fertilizer, is it can cause those soil microbes to get really, really active, and then they consume a lot of the carbon and release it back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So you're losing organic matter. So I always, if you do add nitrogen, just make sure at some point in the season you're also adding carbon back to the soil, just to account for that. It's always important to account for whatever actions you're taking in terms of the balance of your soil and your soil ecosystem.
And to add to that, we do have a local compost, not really facility, but I guess organization. She's located up in like the Palm Beach Gardens, kind of Jupiter area. So that would be something you may look into, because I know she does sell nutrients from all of the worm poo and also the worm tea as well. So some options to consider, but yes, I see Wormy Girl. I think she's called the Worm Queen, but yes, Wormy Girl too. Yes. So, all right. So I just want to wrap up. I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and big thanks to Nina and to Marie for being with us and answering all of these great questions. Through the Office of Sustainability, you know, if you are interested in your soil health and learning more, there are some things that we offer for free to City of West Palm Beach residents and water customers that can, you know, help you maybe along your journey if you're doing anything in your yard or in your garden. So we have native tree giveaways. We don't give away fruit trees, so I know we get that question a lot, but we do give away the native trees, and also we have rain barrel giveaways. So that natural, you know, rainwater that would normally be washed down into your storm drain is being captured in the rain barrel and is a lot better for your plants than, say, the water from your hose. That water from your hose is not, I don't want to say it's bad, but it's been treated for us, not for your plants. So they just really enjoy that rainwater. So it's something to think about. And if you're interested in any of these programs, we do have a lot more, but I'm not going to keep you guys on here for too long. But if you want to learn more about our programs, just visit wpb.org/green, or you can also email us sustainability@wpb.org. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions or inquiries that you have. And with that, I just want to again say a big thanks to all of you for joining us today. And I hope you have a great rest of your Saturday and a great weekend. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Thanks.
bye, everyone.
Bye.